WXYZ345 says, does Echoes of Wisdom feel like a true top-down Zelda experience, or does it have too much Wild Era influence in it? Um, I
Too
would
much of this newfangled wild Zelda.
I would say, I guess amongst the top, quote unquote, top-down games, there's maybe a little bit more similarities among the bunch, but at the same time, I would say, and maybe we can expand this to talk about just what is considered a quote unquote traditional Zelda experience, but I think the definition of that, the series has been around so long now and done so many different things that I've done it myself, but I don't like this idea of defining a like X thing as a traditional Zelda game, because um what a lot of pardon me, what a lot of people define as a quote unquote traditional Zelda game, you could not apply to what I think is the most one of the most and important and iconic Zelda games, which is the first one. So and then this, even Zelda 2, A Link to the Past, A Link to the Past, another tentpole game in the series, does not resemble a lot of what is considered a traditional Zelda game. We see a lot of elements come into form there, but yeah, I don't think you can truly define that. Even if we're talking top down, you have Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks that are quite different, but I would argue those are top down games. So I don't know what you all think, but I think it's a great Echoes of Wisdom is a great game, and in fact, I think it is one of the more authentic Zelda experiences, because actually it sort of has a lot of the spirit of the original Legend of Zelda game in it. Um, but I don't know, Corey. Corey, what do you think? Is this a true top-down Zelda?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's like there's no reason. I'm gonna people watching. I'm gonna hit you with a cold hard truth. Zelda is going to keep evolving, and we're never going to get a traditional Zelda game ever again, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
They're always continuing to break the mold. That's what they've always done. And even though we had an era where there was a formula that tended to be stuck to, that wasn't something that where they were like, "Hey, let's make a formula and then we're only going to do that." They were always trying to push the mold and innovate and do new things. And eventually they got to a point where they were like, okay, we've been doing pretty good, but let's throw the playbook out and like do completely new things. And this game is, I think, the perfect example of. We talked about it in the last episode. It's the perfect blending of old and new, because to answer your question, I think this feels exactly like a top-down Zelda game. This plays and feels to me exactly like a top-down Zelda game. You go to different parts of the overworld in the land of Hyrule, where there's a group of people who they have a problem and you got to help solve it. And that problem leads to a dungeon, and then you do the dungeon, which has a lot of cool puzzles and a boss at the end. And then you rinse and repeat and get a bunch of cool new abilities, meet a bunch of people, go throughout the whole land, solve puzzles, fight bosses. It feels exactly like that. It feels in that way. It feels exactly like A Link to the Past, A Link Between Worlds, Oracle of Ages and Seasons, Link's Awakening. It feels a lot like the original. Like, yes, it feels a lot like those games, but also it has those wild influences, those Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom influences, which inherently affect the gameplay and the second to second experience of you playing this game. It affects your traversal of the overworld and your combat and the way that you solve puzzles. And I don't, that doesn't make it feel less like a traditional top down Zelda game to me, you know? And
Absolutely.
that being said, there's gonna be new games that come out that change things drastically or stick close to maybe they invent a new formula. Maybe it's possible. I think it's more likely that they continue to try and change things up because that's just what we know they love to do. But it's so I kind of reckoned with this a while ago because the first time I got really into the series and was anticipating a new game coming out was before Skyward Sword. And then I remember Skyward Sword coming out and playing it and being like, that was a sweet game, but it didn't really feel like a Zelda game. And I feel like I'm so glad that I don't think that about any of these games anymore because, like, why would you want more of the same all the time? You know, you want them to grow and evolve and change. And, like, I don't feel that way about Skyward Sword anymore. I look at that game and I'm like, that's a quintessential Legend of Zelda game. Even though it has things that are different than all Legend of Zelda games, like, that's a
Mm-hmm.
Zelda game, you know? And this is a Zelda game. This is a quintessential top-down Legend of Zelda game, you know?
Yeah. McKenna, do you want to add anything to that?
So to me, the tradition of Zelda is to change things up, toss it up, try new things every new entry, make it feel fresh in some way, but also like carry forward stuff from the previous games. If you ever sat in like, well, not in like one sitting, but just played through the series in release order, you can feel how they've brought forward things from each of the games into the next and just maybe, refined it or whatever. Um, you can feel it from Skyward Sword to Breath of the Wild, even though they're very different games. And you can feel it from uh, the Wild games to Echoes of Wisdom. But you can also feel a lot of influence from earlier games, and there's a lot of new stuff in Echoes of Wisdom and that we've never seen before in Zelda. Uh, and that's what makes it Zelda.
Yeah.
You know what this game really reinvigorated that they have to expand on. We need to see now what the quintessential side-scrolling Zelda game looks like. You got Zelda 2, you got Link's Awakening, you got Echoes of Wisdom. What's next,
Ooh.
baby?
Well, in that case,
I did
Zelda.
think after playing Echoes, like they could do a Zelda 2 follow up.
Hmm.
Totally could.
They could do it.
Oh well,
It was
the thing I was gonna say actually, this goes back to when we were talking about what mechanics, what could they
yes.
adjust.
Yeah.
I started to think like on the platformer thing, like this sort of could be. I got to thinking about Mario Odyssey, how you could like inhabit all these different abilities.
Yep.
But I would like to see it where I would like to see just give Mario echoes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, could be less enemy and combat, but more of like things that you could throw out and platform off of. But sorry, that's not Zelda.
Well,
But
I like the side-scrolling thing or whatever. Like I come to think of it, like a huge chunk of this game is spent in side-scrolling. A lot of the dungeons are side-scrolling sections. There are multiple boss fights and boss fight phases that are in side-scrolling sections.
Mhm.
So this is clearly something that they are intentionally expanding, and I feel like it to me it brings to mind like we've talked about how cool it would be if like an indie studio or they let someone develop like a Metroidvania style Zelda game. I feel like this is legitimately a step towards that being a possibility.
they should
Because
let
now
Grezzo
that
do it.
they've yeah, why not? Because now that they've like shown that stuff works for combat, that stuff works for puzzle solving and exploration, like I don't know, man.
Hmm.
It could happen.
We watched this video last week. I want to point people to it. That Good Blood video about the question no one asks Shigeru Miyamoto. Corey, you watched that, right?
No, I didn't.
Oh, I'm gonna send you the link. But
All right.
um, they talk about how in all these different interviews, I'll quickly paraphrase it because I cannot do this. This is a great video. I can't do it justice, but Good Blood on YouTube. He said from like the original Zelda game up until whatever, as long as he's doing interviews for these games, he talks about how he imagined the Zelda games as a box garden, a miniature garden, which is like a Japanese concept that they break down in the video. And it really, I love the original Legend of Zelda. Everybody knows that. It's one of my favorite games. And that video, it really solidified to me that yes, they went on and they like honed certain things about the series. You could view A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening as sort of like perfecting the formula, Ocarina of Time moving it into 3D, but flaws and all, the original Legend of Zelda I think is the most pure expression of like what Miyamoto envisions this series as, and this video really like put the nail in the coffin for me for that. And I think it got me to thinking that why I sort of view some of the ones that people view as like the traditional ones that we want to see the series return to, that I didn't love as much, is because like they are too like streamlined. Like here's the formula, here's all this, and I love that like Breath of the Wild on like that these games are they've gotten closer to that feeling of just pure like exploration, like
it's a little thing called
pure wead. Watch our old videos to figure out what that is.
Wonder, exploration, adventure, and dodge.
I'm having a hard time like kind of just watch that video and it makes my point for me. But I feel like this game, it's maybe not the closest, but I feel like it captures that spirit of, like, sure, you might miss things, or like you might find things in a weird order, or like when we talked about Tears of the Kingdom, Corey, you did some just stupid stuff that you should have done later. But that's to me like kind of the beauty
that was weird
of these games. And I won't name game names because people get sensitive, but some of the ones that people are like, I wish they would make more like this, to me are like the least interesting, least ambitious games in the series.
Ocarina of Time.
Whoa, no, I think of one in particular that's specifically a reaction to the series going to
Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword.
Oh, okay, one of them, like
all of them.
But like I think of like, Anyway, I think this is like a pure, not just
you pure... make it.
Sorry, go ahead.
You make like the point you're making is exactly true. Like when people say I miss traditional Legend of Zelda games, they mean they miss Ocarina of Time and
Twilight
Princess and Wind Waker, where it's like the Zelda formula, right? But if we're actually talking traditional Legend of Zelda games, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Echoes of Wisdom are the closest in essence to the original Legend of Zelda game than, in my book, any other Zelda game.
Mm-hmm.
Because I haven't watched the video, but I know I've done plenty of my own, external research on the subject and like seen Miyamoto's interviews and stuff like that, and like that's what the goal was with the original, and then it took a specific direction which developed into something that we all know and love. But there's still something so like core to that concept that I feel like is the reason that they probably wanted to try to break conventions in the first place, because they probably strayed a little too far from what that core exploration, that core principle was. That single little seed of adventure that is, you know, causes joy for so many people. And I feel like they're starting to lean so much more into that, which is sick because I love that.
Yeah, getting a green whiz robe and not being able to use it right away because you don't have it
Who
is like
doesn't
the
love that?
that to me is like the you find the arrows or you find the bow in level 1 in the Legend of Zelda, but if you haven't bought arrows, you can't, you got to go figure that out. Or like, or just like getting something that's really like, this feels way too OP, why would they give me this? It's like finding the ice rod in the cave by Lake
And Link to
Hylia
the
and A Link to the
Past.
Past,
Yeah.
and it's like, whoa, like, am I supposed to have this, you know? um
Yeah.
there's just when it becomes to expected, like, oh, here's the dungeon item, here's the, I don't know, anyway. It's the most, it's pure Zelda, this game is, I think. Let's close it out. I have one non-Echoes question, but it was in the thing, and we don't have to go too crazy. This could be its own podcast, but D4C Heartbeam, most underrated Zelda game. One where a visit now would open some new perspectives. I just want to say, to me, most underrated. I think this might be like factually true. Is
I think Goo has the right answer, probably.
Zelda 2? Because because I was reading about it earlier. I'm always reading about it. I love the game, but I'm looking at, go to Wikipedia, right? I'm sourcing Wikipedia.
Read up.
But pull up like the reception or whatever, and it's like, yeah, the game, it's like got pretty much like positive reviews. Everyone was like, hey, this is a pretty cool game. It's not like the one other game, but hey, it's a pretty cool game in its own right. Mostly good reviews, good scores, and now all of a sudden it's constantly debated, is this the black sheep of the Zelda series? But like, that's, I don't know. It's like, to me, that like our fan base itself underrates it from like what its actual like it's like gaining that legacy more and more as time goes on. So I think that's the most underrated, just objectively speaking. Look at the numbers. They don't lie. What do you think, Corey?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're factually, that's probably right, because like that Zelda 2 has become, and like, because of what Zelda is now and became, like, Zelda 2 sticks out like a sore thumb naturally, just because it's so different in form from so many other Legend of Zelda games, and that's because it was the second one and they were trying something new, and then they did something else that was new, and that other new thing happened to be closer to the first thing and also spawned a bunch of other things. So it's like a weird sandwich where Zelda 2's in there and people are just like, what's that weird side-scrolling really hard Legend of Zelda game, you know? For a lot of people, besides the multiplayer Legend of Zelda games, which have their own stigma surrounding them, Zelda 2 has become, for a lot of people, the de facto worst Zelda game, just because it's so different in form from other Legend of Zelda games. But I agree that you need to look at what it brings to the table, because there is a lot of really cool stuff in that game, and there's a lot of really cool stuff that could be re-implemented into the series, like side-scrolling sections maybe.
Ooh.
And the Metroidvania elements. But I guess since Goo covered most of that, I'll not less of like a underrated, because it was clearly huge when it came out and got the praise it deserved. But I think, for in terms of underappreciated games in the series, just to say something different, I think the original is very underappreciated, because a lot of people just think that it's too inaccessible, or it's too difficult, or it's too obscure or vague in terms of some of the secrets. But if you, like we've just been talking about, if you take a look at a lot of the core principles of the most recent Legend of Zelda games, of Echoes of Wisdom, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, they they in essence hit very close to what the idea was, and the gameplay mechanics were for the original Legend of Zelda, because a lot of it's about exploration and finding secrets and doing things the way that you find them, you know? And I think
And
that is something, I think a lot of people, I think a class could be taught about Zelda 1 and 2. You can learn a lot
yeah,
from Zelda 1 and 2.
uh, yeah, I'm with you there. McKenna, I don't think you agree, because you rank Zelda 2 rather low, but
Not because I.
not because you think it's bad, right? I get why it's people's not
um,
cup of tea, but what would you say is the most underrated Zelda game?
I, there are a few I've had kind of swirling around in my head. Um, Maybe not under. I think the Oracles are probably underplayed. Maybe not underrated. Just they're not maybe not talked
Totally.
about as much because not as many people have played them. You can really see like the Nintendo idea of the console as a toy with the DS, because they
Hmm.
have all these mechanics with it, and Phantom Hourglass uses those mechanics, the touch, the microphone's a little bit shoddy at times, but I think I think the stuff it does is really cool, and the dungeons are the way they're structured is different than that, and Spirit Tracks is different than any other Zelda game. They have a different kind of layout where you're very going like floor by floor. Um, and I know people don't like the returning to the same dungeon multiple times. But I enjoy it. I kind of see that as like the overworld of the game, where it's a location that you're going back to, and you've got new items, and you can traverse it differently, experience it differently.
Oh yeah, I'm with you.
And it's got like some of the best items in the series.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing for I'm not crazy about as time goes on, it even gets less for me. I'm not as crazy about the DS Legend of Zelda games, but it's for sure you can't I feel like it's you can't deny that they implemented a bunch of super cool gameplay concepts, and they have excellent item usage and really cool usage of the touch screen and the way that you use the items to solve puzzles. There is some great stuff in those games, both of those games.
Yeah, what McKenna you said about it, like just understanding it as a toy, like it's a different type of it's another pure game, I think, to me, not in the same concept as like we were talking about with the original Legend of Zelda, but just in terms of how Nintendo will take like the functionality of whatever console or thing they're working on and really like explore it, you know. And I think they that does it really well, and I think it does it. That's been my opinion that we've gone over a million times in videos, but I think it does it better than Spirit Tracks. So nah. If you like Spirit Tracks more, that's fine. But yeah, me and that was our biggest battle one time on ranking all the games. We argued over that more than any other
We
game.
argued which one was going to be higher in the middle of the tier.
And they were like, oh yeah, Ocarina of Time, it's fine, it's good, put it up there.
Yeah.